Welcome to the Beau Show. As you know, I take a cultural approach to my show because culture sometimes marks a barometer of where we are and perhaps how far we have devolved as a society. It can be a revelation or it can be an evaluation. Not long ago, I watched a Netflix true crime documentary from director Felicity Morris called The Tinder Swindler, which is a catchy name in and of itself, but it also makes a person curious, as only good marketing would do. I figured this might have largely been marketed towards females, but I thought I should also get some insight as well. The story centers around Simon Leviev, son of an Israeli billionaire from the diamond business. Leviev, which is not his real name, used the dating app Tinder to match with women who were blown away by his lavish lifestyle, private jets, expensive champagne-popping parties, the Ritz, the Four Seasons, an island, you name it. The women that Leviev seemed to match with were mostly blonde Scandinavians. That was his type. And the women were certainly beautiful. As you can tell by the trailer, the women were wooed by his lavish lifestyle and what he could provide to them. His game was always the same. He would say things like they had a special connection, and all the women thought that he was intelligent and witty. One woman described it as like stepping into a movie. Well, that may be true, except it was Leviev's comedy and the girl's nightmare. So if he were a magician, his setup was always pretty much the same. Match with a beautiful girl, propose a first date at somewhere that likely tops what 99% of women are used to getting, and use that bait to lure them in. One of the females said that after the initial meal that they had at his 5-star hotel, he asked her to join him on his private jet the next day. It was certainly impulsive, but it fits with the persona of a diamond prince businessman who is used to luxury. And if you're the girl and he's saying all the right things and you don't have to pay a dime, you go along with this c'est la vie proposal, which may never happen again in your lifetime. When that woman went to the plane, she shared a limo with a woman who claimed to be Simon's ex-wife, who had their young child along with them. So the four of them, along with Simon's big Russian bodyguard, Peter, took that flight. But at no point does this woman feel unsafe because his ex-wife and child are along with them, which, although that seems really, really weird for a second date, portrays Leviev as a kind ex-husband and a caring father. The victim may think, well, if he's willing for me to meet his ex-wife and his kid, I'm certainly good enough. And it also gives her a vote of confidence about Simon from the ex-wife. But again, if this is a magic trick, it's all part of the setup. In these montages of anecdotes from the victims, they were all equally under his spell because he had done a good performative job of making them feel safe and comfortable. Plus, he dangled the carrot of being so successful, which many women find attractive. It allows them to be taken care of. And he seems to have had a way of charming them. His ruse was so perfect that his business had its own website, which gave authenticity to his work. The bodyguard also gave some credibility, since Leviev would reveal to these women that he had wrongly spent time in a South African prison because of enemies that he had in the diamond business. And it was this information that let the women know that this was not only an important guy, but that people may be out to get him because of his money and his success. And if you've ever seen the movie Blood Diamond with Leonardo DiCaprio, you will know how lethal the diamond business actually can be, especially in the country of South Africa. So the story checks out. The women feel that his job is real, his care and interest are real, and that he's a high-profile guy that many people are jealous of. And with that premise, he is then able to present the shock of him being hurt. He would send photos of the aftermath of an attack, in which he's safe but visibly shaken, and that his bodyguard is very injured with blood all over his head. He does this mostly through WhatsApp, which is a common global messaging service. He sends photos and voice notes, so we get an idea of the performance of it all. This, of course, shocks his female victims. And bear in mind that none of the females at this point in time know of each other. They think that they are Simon's one and only. because of his doting messages to them, which are exactly what these women want to hear. He even flew to visit one of these women's family, which again, just solidifies his charm in their eyes. A guy willing to fly to meet you and your mom to have dinner is of very high value. So they don't really question whether he's being duplicitous or cheating on them. In fact, he would send selfie videos to them from his plane or from a hotel. And of course, no other woman was in the video. So when he sends shocking information about threats and attacks against them, the woman becomes fearful for his safety. Levayev then tells these women that because of the attacks, it is not safe for him, and that his own bank accounts are considered unsafe and inaccessible. So he asks each woman to get him money temporarily until the security situation settles down a bit. But it could be $10,000, $20,000, or $30,000 in one ask. And because he's done such a good job of taking care of them and witnessing this lifestyle that he has, they consider him to be reputable. And they don't want him to be killed. So he would ask them to sell their car if they had to, or open up new lines of credit. And the women did as he asked. What none of them knew, at least not until much, much later after they were deeply in debt, is that he was using this ploy to fund his other excursions with other women. So one woman's loan that she was taking out was supplying the funds for his next adventure with another woman in what you might call one of the most intricate Ponzi schemes of modern times. Now, when women started to catch on to this, especially as police became involved, his tone went from sweet to scared to threatening and highly vindictive. So now these women's lives are threatened, where he has placed them in a position of vulnerability and fear, not just for themselves, but for their families. Over time, these women learned that Simon Levayev was born Shimon Hayut, who grew up in a small town outside of Tel Aviv. His criminal charges go back several years. He had committed some small frauds in Israel, but had fled the country. He then conned 3 Finnish women, spent 2 years in a Finnish prison, and then was sent back to Israel. But he escaped Israel and assumed a new identity in Europe as Simon Levayev, the son of a billionaire diamond mogul, Lev Levayev. So this guy became a professional con man, and his biggest con is getting these women to open up credit cards in their own name, so it's a fingerprintless crime, one that he has made possible by making the setup so believable. The director, Felicity Morris, claims that the women that Levayev conned didn't fall for Simon because of his money. Take a listen.
The interesting thing, I think, that we learned while getting to know them and getting to understand the relationships and reading through the incredible archive that we had, which was their WhatsApp logs. We were all messaging constantly. And what we discovered was that actually these women didn't fall for Simon because of his money. That wasn't the case. Like, Simon was a committed, reliant, loving, caring boyfriend. All the while they're doing this because he has genuinely made them believe. And, you know, I think anyone who was in this situation would also believe that his life was, you know, totally in danger, and that if they didn't help him, you know, the person they love at this point most in the world, then, you know, that he would die. When they discover that he isn't who they thought he was, the guy that they've slept with, that they've been sharing a bed with, that they've entrusted with, you know, secrets and so on, is why this sort of devastation that's felt is obviously and understandably so real and so strong and so horrific.
And here's where I want to get analytical and dive into the cultural component of all this. Because in many ways, I felt that maybe the obsession over rich men was kind of an American thing, but apparently it's not. Morris claims that these women fell for Simon because he was a reliable boyfriend. But let's take a step back. Apps like Tinder are based upon snap judgments, which is what author Malcolm Gladwell wrote an entire book about. We all do it. It's a psychological truth. People swipe on apps because of some appealing physical characteristic. If the guy happens to be in nice clothes and on a private jet or an expensive car, well, that ups the ante a bit. I know this because I've seen women swipe and can see how they light up if they see certain key features, or in some cases if they see red flags. Whereas men may be swiping on sole aesthetic appeal, the women are looking at other factors. What's his job? Does he have a stupid picture holding a fish? Does he look like a player? Does he look like he can support me? Simon used all of this to his advantage. He knows that women look for those things, so he flaunts them. After all, you only have about 5 photos or so to tell your story. When your job says LLD diamonds, women are going to perk up then. And then your first date is not getting a quick drink down the road, it's a meal at a 5-star hotel. Then, using that momentum, he capitalizes by another impulsive proposal. Jet setting to Dubai or Amsterdam, where there is more wining and dining. And none of them know that there are other women involved, or that he is lying about this security and safety threat situation. It seems that Morris, the director, is empathetic to these women's cause because she sees them as having legitimate relationships with Leviav. And there is also the phenomenon of carpe diem, seize the day. In the normal humdrum of boring life, if a guy comes along to literally sweep you off your feet right into a Gulfstream jet, what woman wouldn't be enticed by that? But this is where a person has to have keen judgment. For instance, I think it's a red flag that Leviav showed off so much in his photos. I think that reeks of douchebaggery. Men that do that are showing off in many cases to make up for some other shortcoming. And for the guy, how would he ever really know if the woman was into him truly for who he is? Because he has lured her by virtue of the materialistic life that he can provide. You can't tell me that any of these women accepted the initial date by virtue of his looks alone. You can't really gauge a person's intellect or personality from a one-page profile that you spend likely less than 5 seconds on before you swipe. And while Leviav is good as a swindler, ultimately, anyone that would open up a credit card after dating a guy for a very short period of time is highly naive.